Welcome back to the Wacky Wonderful Show.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. We're very glad that you have joined us to watch this show this week.
Yeah.
We're on episode 2. It's episode 6 of the Wacky Wonderful Show. But we're in our second week of talking about Dune.
This is a new campaign.
It's a new campaign.
Right.
We did like 4 weeks of Harry Potter, and then we're opening, we're doing 3 weeks of Dune before we take a little break in between the seasons of the podcast and everything we do for Christmas. But
it's pretty amazing how you can get burnt out on one subject after only 4 weeks.
4 weeks. Were you tired of Harry Potter?
I was so, and at the time I was watching movies, I was reading books, I was doing research on the internet, we were doing these videos, and I was just, oof.
You were just tired. You're getting tired of it.
I was getting tired. I thought, okay, I want to leave this. I want to leave this world and move into something new.
Well, yeah, but Dune's a good one to scooch into.
It really is.
I think we'll both get better at it because the thing is, these worlds have so much to cover that's not just as simple as 4 or 6 or 8 weeks or 2 weeks. You know, there's so much to them if we can use our imagination and what we're passionate about.
There's so much in Dune that we could get into. And,
so much.
And later on, the lore, it gets wacky.
Yeah.
Have you looked into it at all?
The Dune lore?
Yeah.
Not to the extent past, the milking of the cat and all that stuff.
I don't consider that lore. Yeah. Like, I'm talking like original books and extended lore. It gets crazy.
Does it?
Yeah. Especially when it sort of gets into Paul's reign and what starts to happen. And then when it gets into Leto Atreides the second's reign, that's where things get weird.
Really?
They get wild.
Wait, wild or weird? Like wacky Terry Pratchett?
No,
strange kind of thing?
What do you think of human sandworm hybrids?
That's pretty wacky.
That's pretty wacky. Okay, yeah, that's what I thought.
I think the blue eyes is about as wacky as I'm comfortable with, honestly.
Yeah, no, it gets pretty crazy.
Okay. Well, do you think that the current Dune will do that? They won't get too wacky.
Telling the original story is more of a political thing, more of some moral things. So no, we're not going to get that wacky.
Well, in some ways, some people might consider what J.R.R. Tolkien wrote as the before the ages. You know, what he wrote down in the Silmarillion. The Silmarillion.
I think you had it right the first time.
Silmarillion.
Silmarillion.
No. Silmarillion.
I think it's Silmaril.
Well, it's the Silmarils.
Yeah.
The Silmarillion. What was accounted in that book might be considered as wacky when he's explaining like how Middle Earth came to be.
Yeah, but that's
with the Valar and the Maiar and how like what they did and all of the political things that went on.
If you read it, it reads like history texts.
Yeah.
But not like fact history texts, like lore history texts. So it's sort of up to interpretation.
Yeah.
And it happened so long ago that even though its consequences are happening in our current world of Lord of the Rings that we see in the movies, it's still, you think of some of the things that happen. It's like that, somebody's hand gets bit off by a werewolf. That absolutely sounds like, history lore, bedtime stories that would be, made up for kids.
That's true. Well, I mean, I don't think with the movies of Dune, they will get wacky because, like you said, it's more of the political side of what's going on with the Paul Atreides story, But however, I am intrigued. I do like wacky if it doesn't put me off to it too much.
Well, I mean, if they do the second, and if they do a third, if they round out the whole first book, extremely well, there honestly, in my opinion, there's no need to go into anything else.
Gotcha.
It's just a perfect story.
Yeah. Okay. So. Well, what do you say we get into it?
Yeah.
You ready?
Yeah. Who's going
All right.
first?
So I'm going to open up, and what I'm going to be talking about is going to be looking at screenshots from scenes from Dune Part 1, and we are going to be learning about how to light cinematically, using Dune as the example. And I know I've talked about lighting in different ways. Today we're going to be focusing and ratcheting down on practical examples and pointing out exactly what's going on in each shot. I think I have like 7 different examples, and we're going to get pretty detailed.
Very nice.
And then you're going to be talking about...
I'm going to be talking about the reasons for Arrakis being such an integral part of this universe.
Yeah. And what I'm interested to hear from yours is why the crap is Arrakis valuable?
Yeah. That's what we're going to be looking at.
Why does everyone covet it so much? All right. Hope you enjoy it. Let's get into it. We'll be back at the end. Hey everybody, welcome back to the studio. I'm very glad you're watching, and thank you so much for clicking on this video. Have you ever wondered how to look at a scene in a movie from Hollywood and know how to light that cinematically? How did they light it? What are tips and tricks that I can learn, or that I can even just observe in these movies and say, how do I apply that to my own stuff and make my footage look cinematic? Well, a lot of times, to be honest, it takes just practice. But I do believe, this is something I believe in very strongly, if you know what to look for, you can watch Hollywood films and other people's work and analyze it and learn from them so that you can start applying those tips and tricks tomorrow on your stuff. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to be looking at, I think, 7 different shots from variety of scenes from the movie Dune Part 1, and I'm going to be breaking down specific lighting details that a lot of people don't think to look for, or they have to kind of train themselves to look for. So think of this, if you're not familiar with tips like shadow side, motivated lighting, what a key light is, what texture in light might be, then I'm going to be explaining that to you, and I hope this is helpful, and let's just have a good time exploring the art that this, the director of photography, Craig Fraser, brought to us in this film. So, you guys ready? Let's get into it. We'll look at the first shot we have here. So the very first one we have Paul Atreides. He's during the fight scene, and it's lit beautifully, but in some ways simply, it's basically the main light source is coming from the window, but there's a lot going on in the scene even if you are not aware. You might just think, oh, they shot light through that window and then everything just kind of looks good because they had good cameras, right? That's not the case. You could shoot this with, an iPhone with one of those lens attachments onto it, or a simple Canon DSLR, and make it look this good if you light things correctly. So what I have here is I have a little diagram to point out what's going on lighting wise. So let's just start first with shadow side. I've talked about this on previous videos. One of the quick first things you should know about making something look cinematic is to shoot shadow side, and that essentially means like, where's the shadows on the face? If you have the strongest light hitting someone on one side of the face, then you should put the camera on the other side. So the predominant part of their face that the camera's seeing is the shadow side. So right off the bat with this shot, we see with Paul, they're shooting shadow side, and I got that circled there on his face. The next thing to look for is, where is the main source of light? Where is it coming from? Well, I have this little second picture as a diagram to show you. It's coming through that texturized window. And in that specific shot with his trainer, that's actually textured light because they have a textured block on that light. But in the shot for Paul, where might be the interesting light textures that you see? Well, it's on the floor that window is casting shadows for. It adds a lot of depth and just something interesting to the image. So you have that strong, motivated window light. Motivated meaning we know where the light's coming from because they showed us in the other shot that it's coming from that window. So we're not confused as to where the light source is in the scene. Then let's look at a couple other items. You have depth, and I've talked about this before. the way you create depth in an image is color difference mixed with exposure difference. And so for right here, like look at his shirt, look at his skin. It is brighter than that little illuminating light that's hitting that wall behind him. If you see those arrows in that depth section, then you can see there's an exposure difference and obviously there's a color difference. The background is more of that burnt orange brown tones and his shirt is like this off-white color, and same with his skin tones. So you have color and exposure difference. Then you also, to give it a little bit of extra bump, if you look real closely, to pull him away from the background, to emphasize him a little bit more, as they put a little backlight off to the side, motivated backlight. So what they did is they probably just had a light shining on him or shining through a blanket just to give a little touch on the rim of his shoulder and his hair to separate him from the background. But they used it in a motivated way. They created this in such a way to make it look like that light reflecting in the corner off to the side on that back wall that's that burnt orange color is actually creating an illuminating outline that's very delicate on his shoulders, his shirt, and his hair. So you have motivated backlight, motivated key light, depth, shadow side, texture. These are the things that makes up a good shot. So I want to go ahead and, this is a pretty easy one. I want to take a look at a couple more. The next one is actually also very basic as well, because you clearly see where the light source is coming from. Clearly, it's that little spot of light, that little window in the back that's shooting into the room. And the cool thing about this is it's working almost like a spotlight to illuminate that wall, going across the wall, hitting the back of him, and creating a little bit of light on his face. So if we look at this in a diagram way, it doesn't look like they did, but they actually did shoot shadow side because his eye line is looking to this side of the camera. Now, if he was looking to this side of the camera, then they wouldn't be shooting shadow side. But because he's looking off this direction, they are. And so yeah, and then the texture is actually the shadow side of that light, that spotlight hitting that really cool design that they put on the wall of those sandworms. And so that's kind of where the interesting texture part of the light comes into this image. You obviously have the motivated key light, which is a window that is creating the source of the light in this scene, and it's hitting him kind of as a behind key light, and it's working as a mix between a key light and a backlight because it's hitting his shoulder, his arm, and the side of his face. Then you have clear depth because he's so dark. And he's got a little bit of green, bluish tones to his outfit. It separates him from those warm or kind of whiter, warm walls that are surrounding him. So you see color and exposure depth on the walls and him. And when you're creating depth, it always should be, what is the focus? What is the subject of the frame, which is Paul Atreides here? And then what is the background? And so what's behind him? So there should be some color difference, some depth there. And notice they switched it. On the other shot I did, he was brighter than the background. Now with this, he's darker than the background. But there's still that color depth. Let's go ahead and go to another one. The next one is simple. It's him outside. It's a cloudy day. There's got some shadows on his face, but overall, it's very clean, soft light. And this is actually something a lot of filmmakers use in a quick way. You know, they'll either shade the subject, or they'll shoot on a cloudy day because it makes a very nice, even light. It's a little boring at times, but it's really easy to work with. However, they actually, even with something as simply lit as this, there is still a lot of detail we can pull from it. For example, they're shooting shadow side. Once again, I want to point that out in every one of these because it's good to get in your mind. You have the texture in the light, in the shadows, in the background. That's literally the beach, the rocks, the cliffside. That's actual light texture. If the whole background was just the sky, then it'd be very soft texture. But this is giving us a little bit more of an interesting texture that's created by the angle of the light and just the image itself. You have the depth. Once again, the background is brighter than he is, and the tones are a little bit different. He's just the slightest bit warmer than the cool background that he is up against. And then you actually have the motivated key light. So although they're shooting in a day that's cloudy and it's kind of creating this softbox effect, you still have a side of the face that is being hit by a key light in a very, very soft way. And that's being motivated from the sky and perhaps even, I didn't label it here, being reflected off the water into his face. And then you have, because that skylight is hitting the white or the brownish white sand at his feet, you have a nice little soft fill that's filling the dark side of the face, so it's not in complete shadow. So yeah, that's it's a simpler shot. Probably didn't take as long to set up, but it still has a lot that we can pull from it. This is a really cool shot because it actually has leading lines that are awesome. Because they're trying to get in the ship, they're trying to escape a worm. They're trying to escape getting eaten, essentially. And it's cool because the leading lines on the top of them and the bottom of them, it's this cool profile leading lines. It's literally creating a scissor effect to show you where is the importance in the shot. And it's obviously the two people that are standing inside of this scissor angle. And we obviously have depth in this image. They are darker and have more texture than the background, and the colors are different. And then you have the shoot shadow side because they're looking off to this side of the camera. So all of this side of them on their face and everything, on both of them, it's in the shadow side. Then you have the texture. The texture is interesting in this because, like I said, the foreground has a lot of detail because of their outfits in the ship, and the background is super soft. It's just very soft sand dunes, very soft sky lighting. And so the texture is different than we've seen before. It's not like really detailed texture, but it is a texture difference between the foreground and the background, which also adds depth as well. You have the motivated the motivated key light, which is the sun, which is coming down and hitting, on this side, hitting them in the face with a really harsh light. And then you actually have a motivated fill light that kind of fills in some of their face coming from the bottom, which is the sun being reflected off the sand. So, this would be really interesting. I'm sure it's very difficult to film in any kind of desert because you just have constant sunlight. And in order to get harsh lights, but not too harsh, is also very difficult because if you just put a blanket over them and shield them from the light, create a softbox effect, it looks unnatural. That warm desert harsh sunlight is not hitting them correctly to make it look authentic. But if you don't do that and you use the sun, you're getting too harsh of shadows. And so it's a really difficult balance, and also actors are getting hot. They have to wear all these costumes and everything. So it's hard work, and it should be appreciated. Let's go to the next one. This one I chose because it is all over the place. It really is. So we have a group of people, and I wanted to focus on this shot where we have Leto Atreides standing a little closer than the other individuals. So we have two main light sources. So if you look at the top right-hand smaller picture, you have the motivated key lights are coming from two directions. And it's hitting everyone on the sides of the face. Now, it's hitting people hotter on one side if they're closer to the light, or on the other side if they're closer to that light. So it actually depends on the person on who's on what shadow side. Does that make sense? So if you look at the shot with Paul and Leto, you see on Leto, it kind of looks like his key lights hitting him on this side and they're shooting shadow side, where if you look in the background at Paul, they're actually not shooting shadow side. If you compare it to the eye line, they are, but they're actually not because the majority of the face is on the bright side. So you have the shadow sides established. You have the texture, which actually, this is interesting. The texture they chose for this room was mist or fog because they wanted this room to feel like it was kind of dirty and dusty. And so them on these backgrounds, it's actually the texture is a soft glow. So it's not a detailed texture, it's a soft glow texture. It's this dusty air texture. You also have a little bit of motivated backlight, if you see that below the texture circle, and that is using the key to backlight a few of these characters, like Paul. And then you have a little bit of motivated fill, because if those were the only light sources, well, then Leto would be in complete shadow on his face. And so what they have is, I'm sure they put some light on them in production, but the motivation of that light is supposed to be kind of the room as a whole / being reflective off the floor from those two light sources. So let's go to the next one. We have kind of an interesting shot. They chose to use the sun as the key light and as the backlight at the exact same time. So if we break this one down, they're shooting shadow side. But the interesting thing about this is their whole bodies are shadow side, because the main light, the key light, is behind them. They're all walking away from the light, and it's also illuminating their shoulders and are really hot, and their hairline. It's making it them really stand out from the background. The texture is, once again, kind of this softer, dirty, dusty texture that's differentiating them from the background. So there's that wall plays a big role in kind of this blocky texture look. Like I said, you have the motivated key light, and the backlight is the same light, essentially. It's illuminating, outlining them, and that's the main light source. You also have a nice fill that rises up on their face to fill them in from the sand reflecting onto them. And then the depth is, once again, they are darker than the background, as opposed to them being, brighter than the background, which also adds depth. They're darker, and there's a different color there. So let's look at the last one here. And I really like this one, because this is just a very simple, beautiful close-up shot. It's well crafted. We have a light source that is the window, the top right-hand side. What you see over Duncan's shoulder is actually the light source that's hitting Paul Atreides in the face. But it's actually really cool what they did here, because even if you didn't have that, they are showing you in his close-up where the light source is coming from. We know it's not that window on the way back side of the room, or that big door, but we know there's most likely another door right next to him, because they're literally showing us this is a room of big doors. And so they show us what kind of motivation this light's coming from. It's coming from outside, and it shows us the direction the light is coming. So obviously they shoot shadow side. The depth is something I want to take a second to acknowledge, because there's not really color difference, and there's only a little bit of exposure difference in this shot when it comes to depth. What they did to compensate for that was they chose to make it extremely blurred out. They gave it a lot of depth of field. They pulled their aperture way up, and probably to like a 2.0 or 1.8 or something like that, or 1.5. And they chose to make the depth, him really sharp, the background really out of focus. And that's the depth they chose, along with just a little bit of exposure difference. The texture is actually those really blurry people in the background that are moving. That's kind of the texture in the image. And then you have the motivated key light, as I already said, is that window that's shooting him in the face, that's over Duncan's shoulder. But even in Paul Atreides' close-up, it shows us what a window looks like. That one's just a good ways behind him. And it's cool they framed this up to even make you kind of believe if this light on his face could possibly come from that back window, even though we know it's not. But they framed it up in such a way that, well, it also could be that window a little bit as well. So it's really cool the way you can choose to light things. It honestly is. And if you take these kind of ideas of making sure you shoot shadow side, create depth in your image, make sure you have motivated light source, motivated key, fill, backlighting, based on what's the scene showing us as the light source, and then you use that to motivate the light for the whole scene, and you add a little bit of texture, well, then you're on your way to making your stuff look absolutely incredible, just like Dune, just like these crazy Hollywood films. So I hope you take this, and I hope you start experimenting yourself and enjoy the process of learning something and then implementing it in your own body of work. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, if it was helpful to you, I ask that you subscribe, leave a comment to let me know what you thought, if you learned anything and liked the video. I really appreciate it. And if you want to see another video of mine where I talk about the filmmaking aspects of Dune, you can watch last week's video, but I'll leave a link for it in the description and on the end screen. So thanks so much.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the video. I thank you so much for clicking. Today we're going to be talking about Dune, Arrakis, the desert planet. We're going to be jumping into some ideas and some thoughts of why Arrakis is such an important planet. Why is it the center of everything happening in the Dune world, everything we see in the movie and what we see in the books? We're going to be talking just some briefly on some ideas and some topics, sort of going through all the main players in the story. But first, to understand why Arrakis is so important, you got to kind of understand the spice and what the spice melange is. So first, we just have a picture here of Arrakis, just a nice, planet. Looks deserty. At one point in its history, it wasn't like this, and some things happened. I'm not going to go into all the lore of the story of why it is the way it is, but at one point it was a very nice, lush planet, and it underwent quite a few changes. But like I said, first we're kind of going to get into the spice, and you got to know what the spice is. The spice is essentially it's a drug. It's a very powerful drug. It's an extremely addictive drug as well. So much so that withdrawal from the drug is deadly. If the drug permeates your system and you are completely reliant on it and you stop using it, you will die. So some of the important bits that some of the important things and why people get addicted to the spice is it has a lot of benefits, more benefits than drugs that we have. It's, it provides long life, heightened brain functions, which is extremely important in the Dune lore and in the Dune world, but also it lends prescience or ability to sort of see the future. And if I didn't already say it, this is going to be a more spoiler-heavy video. We're going to be getting into some ideas and topics from Dune that they haven't shown in the movie. And if you haven't read the books or you don't know anything about the story, there's going to be some topics that are spoiler-heavy. So if you're not into that, you can wait, or you can read the books, or whatever you got to do. So essentially, moving on, the next, that's the wrong spice. The spice permeates all, and the Spice Girls do the same. Getting into more of the reason that the spice is so important is, you kind of got to understand a little bit about the history of Arrakis and more about the history of humanity up to this point. Thousands of years before the events of Dune take place, humans relied on AI, robots with minds, for everything. And they got into the habit of using AI, and they got lazy. Eventually, the AI took over, enslaved humans. There was a big mess, rebellions, quite a lot happens. But eventually, humans destroyed the AI and tried to become a society that didn't rely on robotic minds of any kind. So they sought to make human minds more reliable. They sought to enhance their own brain functions. And the spice is extremely useful for that. The spice enhances brain function, and it makes minds run faster and do all sorts of things that nobody thought possible. It's used by quite a few different, rich people and other factions in the world. But one thing in the Dune universe that I don't believe is affected by the spice are the mentats. The mentats are human supercomputers, essentially. They're human, but they have mental capabilities of calculation, strategy. The picture we have here is Thufir Hawat. He is the mentat spy master for the Atreides house, and there's most houses, anybody with any money has a mentat to do the calculations, to do all of the things that traditionally you would use a computer for. And then further, we get into some of the factions that are vying for Arrakis. They're vying for this spice, and some of the reasons that they have for needing it. First of all, we have the Emperor, the Padishar Emperor, Shaddam the Fourth, I believe. His vested interest in the planet is the spice, of course, because most nobles are addicted. I don't know that the Emperor himself is addicted. I don't remember that exactly. But it's also useful for everything that they have to get done. All the things, it provides trade and money and things. But the reason that he's involved in the planet in the story that we see in Dune is to rid himself of Leto Atreides and the Atreides house in general. He fears the houses forming around Leto and revolting against him and dethroning him, essentially. So he's just protecting his own behind, and just that's his main reason for getting the Atreides onto the planet. Now, Leto himself sees the planet as potential. He understands that this is a trap. He understands that the offer to have his family move to such an integral part of the universe with the most prized commodity in the entire galaxy, for every planet, for every house. He understands what this is. It's a trap to get him and his family there so that the Emperor can rid himself of a threat. However, he sees sort of an opportunity here. He sees the number one, the opportunity to obtain the ability to ship out spice and be in control of where it goes and who gets it. But also he sees the potential of the people. The people have been sort of oppressed for many, many years. But he sees the potential in them that they could help him. They could, become something great, and that they have potential to be much more than the people that have ruled the planet so far have seen. That there's much more to them, that they understand and know a lot more about the planet than just the spice, than just what is shown. On the Harkonnen side of things, the Baron has the Harkonnens have ruled the planet for I'm not sure how long, for generations, and this is their number one source of income. They control the spice. They are in charge of shipping and everything. They control the center. So getting thrown off the planet essentially for the Emperor's plans momentarily, in their estimation, momentarily thrown off the planet so that the Atreides can move in. It's all part of the ploy to get rid of House Atreides. The Baron Harkonnen has, and the entire Harkonnen family has a vested interest in killing the Atreides for themselves. There's been a long feud between these two families going back generations. At one point, I believe one of the Atreides family, one of the Harkonnen family were friends, good friends, but eventually it devolved into one of those, Hatfield and McCoy kind of feuds that just last across generations. But also, once the Atreides are gone, he wants to maintain his wealth. He wants to maintain his power. Having control of such an epicenter in the universe allows him to, stick his fingers in the pot of all the wealthy, rich people and have all sorts of power and just everything throughout the universe. So, moving forward, just really quickly, I wanted to throw in that Rabban is the one who's usually mainly in control of Dune. He's the one who oversees Arakim, the city, and he's the one who usually that everybody's dealing with. He's sort of the number one big bad at the level of the planet. The Baron's usually up in his spacecraft, up in the outer atmosphere, and then eventually there's other characters that they have to deal with moving on. The next faction that has a vested interest in Arrakis is the Spacing Guild. Now, spoilers here, incoming. The Spacing Guild has a monopoly on space travel. Before Arrakis and even before the rebellion, of course, humans, to travel through the universe, they used AI. They used robotic systems that could accurately plan out paths through the galaxy and through space itself in order to reach a destination unharmed, avoiding the dangers of space. There's quite a lot of danger out in space. But to do so nowadays, without having the AI and not being able to use a mentat for these kinds of calculations, they use the spice. The spice provides prescience. It provides ability to see into the future. So the Spacing Guild uses it in order to avoid those hazards and to see where they're going, and they do it extremely accurately. Otherwise, space travel is extremely dangerous. This is sort of an unbeknownst to a lot of people in the Dune universe, because here in this photo that I just showed, the Spacing Guild, what they've shown is these guys wearing helmets. What they say in the book that they're wearing is usually like black robes, and they have gray eyes. And later we learn that people who are addicted to the spice and people who have had the spice permeate their blood, they all have the blue in blue eyes, just like the Fremen. And so those who are addicted tend to, especially high nobles and the Spacing Guild, they use contact lenses to just kind of hide it. So, in going on to Arrakis itself, the people there, the Fremen, this is their home world. This is their planet. The reason it's important to them is because, It's not much, but it's theirs. They've learned how to survive. They've learned, how to live, and sort of the inner workings of the planet itself. And they have religion, and they have, economics, and everything sort of surrounding the world. They have plans to, make Dune a more sustainable planet with plant life and water. And so, this is a very important place to them, but they've been oppressed for so many years. But Dune has effects on the Fremen as well. Number one, mainly, is the spice itself. The spice on Dune, on Arrakis, permeates everything. It's in everything. It's in the walls. It's in the air. It's in the sand. And the Fremen use it in their food as well. They have, quite a lot of food that they use with the spice. And if you're not sure, the spice, from what they describe, is sort of a cinnamony. It's sort of a cinnamony kind of smell. It's kind of taste, but also each taste of the spice is different. It's unique. But they use it in rituals. They have like a spice extract that's extremely dangerous that they use. And so it's very important to them. And they're another one of the big players that we see in the story. Before we move on to sort of the last characters, I suppose, that have a vested interest, just briefly kind of want to talk about the Benny Jesuit. So we've established that the Harkonnens need the spice for power, the nobles need spice for addiction, the Spacing Guild needs spice for interstellar travel, but the Benny Jesuit needs spice for their own plans and what they're doing. They are currently in the process, and have been for the last, I don't know how many thousands of years, doing sort of a genetic plan, just sort of planning out, getting genetics to the point where somebody can essentially see into the future and manipulate the future. Their genetics plan, however, relies on them knowing all they can know. And to do that, they have to have the spice. However, for them, it's a different process. It's not just ingesting it with food or drink. They actually have to take that extract that the Fremen make and ingest it. That drink is poisonous. It's deadly to humans. The Benny Jesuit, however, we know they have powers, and so to become a Benny Jesuit mother, you have to ingest the poison and transmutate it so that it's safe. And once you've done that, you can become a Benny Jesuit mother. And what it does for them is gives them the ability to see into the memories of the Benny Jesuit mothers that have come before them, which is integral in Paul Atreides being who he is, and his mother Jessica, and what she eventually sort of becomes later on. Lastly, we have Paul Atreides of the story, the main character. His interest in the planet is shown very early on. He sees visions of the planet. He sees visions of a woman. He's very interested in the planet, and now his father and his family have been given the opportunity to go there. He's sort of naive going onto the planet. Everybody tells him this is dangerous. This is potentially deadly to our entire household. But he still is looking at, all the wondrous things But the terrible things happen. We see in the movie he loses his family, he loses his father, and so his interest in the planet and his interests sort of move to survival and then eventually revenge, fighting back, taking back what was given to his family. He's sort of a messiah to the Fremen, and uses their zealotry to take what's his. The spice gives him the ability to see visions of the future, extremely powerful visions of the future. And, he sees the harm that he could cause with the Fremen and the jihad that they would go on in his name and in his father's name. But, this is about helping the Fremen, saving the planet, and getting revenge. And that's, what's important to him. My last slide here, sort of a vision that Paul sees of the Fremen fighting on other worlds. So he sees how important Arrakis could be and how deadly Arrakis could be. And not just for the spice, but also because of the Fremen. They are also essentially a commodity of this planet. The spice is forged on Arrakis. The Fremen are forged on Arrakis. Both are very powerful. Both are very dangerous. And so Paul sees this, and that's sort of the reason Arrakis is so important. You guys can see all of these various characters, what they rely on, who they rely on, and it all is thrown together on this one planet. Everybody wants something. And while some characters may have more pure intentions than others, Arrakis is caught just in the middle of everything because of its commodities and because of what it is, even though it's kind of a hell planet. So that's kind of the answer to the question. If you came here looking to see why is Arrakis so important, that's the reason. All these people, everything at play, the spice, the Fremen, just kind of wrapped up neatly. So thank you guys for watching. And if you're interested in seeing previous episodes, we have a whole Harry Potter campaign, and there's one previous episode for Dune. We hope to see you guys next time. Thanks. That was a lot of information.
It was. You packed a ton in there.
I was, and here's the thing. I was trying to speed run. I was trying not to, of course, go too fast. I wanted to get the information out. I wanted it to be clear and concise because a lot of things with Dune aren't clear and concise.
Yes.
For in some cases, for like the spice, too much consumption of it will sort of transform your physical body. Mm-hmm. And it gives long life, but like certain like Fremen characters have regular lifespans.
Yeah.
But and Frank Herbert never explains that. He never explains like why it affects different,
Yeah. But it's interesting. I didn't know. Okay, does the Baron, is he like in the films? I know he's on like this flotation device, but when his spine lights up, is that supposed to be because he is constantly consuming spice, isn't he?
I don't know.
Isn't that what causes the obesity?
I'm not sure. I don't remember, honestly. I should have done a little bit more research on that point. I want to say maybe.
Mm-hmm. Maybe
we
can throw it out there as a maybe.
But I'm not too sure about his character. But there's quite a few characters that rely on the spice. Mm-hmm. The Spacing Guild, the Benny Jesuits are kind of the main ones. The Fremen.
Now, in my opinion, if out of all the people who need the spice, the Spacing Guild kind of seems like the ones who are doing it the best.
They do, but the Spacing Guild, when I say they hold a monopoly on space travel, they lord that monopoly over everybody. They use it to manipulate, and fulfill their own machinations.
Yeah, so they're running by tyranny, essentially.
Yeah, and the Emperor has to keep them happy, making sure they have spice. So,
yeah, I'm really looking forward to see who they get as the Emperor for this new Dune franchise.
Yeah,
because they haven't casted him yet. The slide you had up was the old Dune film Emperor, and one thing I wanted to bring up that you mentioned that you didn't, I don't think you said in this video, was how the spice is created.
Yeah, I wanted to leave that a little bit of a mystery.
Okay. Should we, since we're at the end here, we're going to be wrapping up in just a few.
Yeah,
should we talk about it for a second?
About it a little
and if you don't want to know, how the spice is made, then click away.
Yeah.
You got this far in. But if you're curious, we're going to talk about it.
We're going to talk about it a little bit. So at one point, Arrakis was a beautiful planet. It experienced something crashed into it, became a desert, became a frozen wasteland. And the sandworms, or the Fremen call them the Shai Hulud, were, I don't think, originally from Arrakis. I think they were brought here from somewhere else. But they created this desert environment, and they perpetuate it because they hate water. The sandworms hate water. And so they make sure that any water on the surface, any moisture is very deep down.
Yeah. They create caverns in the sand and make sure it sinks down.
Yeah, but water and moisture is important to the birth of sandworms.
Okay.
So the sandworm babies are in sacs.
Yeah.
And of hyper concentrated spice, essentially.
Okay.
Or the spices in their body, and when they defecate or are born, it's a hyper concentrated form of spice that, when it mixes with water and then eventually mixes with the air, creates explosions and eruptions. And that's why, in some areas, as they fly over, they'll say, there's a brown spot. That's spice on the surface. And that comes from baby sandworms being born, or
explosions.
Sand trout, I think they're called.
Okay.
And that's originally how Liet Kynes, the woman who, in the movie, she's stabbed in the back. She whips out the hooks, and then she's stabbed in the back. That's originally how she died. They dropped her, or in the book it was him, into the desert. And, in the book he crawls as far as he can go, but, he knows.
He's going to be found.
The characters lived on the planet for so long. They're essentially a Fremen that, he knows he's going to die. And then he feels the vibrations under the earth, and he smells it in the air. And, the explosions happen, the sand falls in, and he's gone.
Oh, man.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy.
Dune is such a crazy story. It's wild that they were thinking up this kind of sci-fi stuff so long ago. These complex ideas. The worms are necessary for the spice to be around. And if you don't have worms, you don't have interplanetary travel.
Yeah. You want to get in? You want to hear something really crazy?
Okay.
Paul starts terraforming the planet, and it starts becoming more rich with life and trees and water.
And I'm sure some people don't like that.
Oh, eventually, I don't know how many years it is, because I don't know how long Paul lives. I'm guessing a while, quite a while. But his son, after Paul dies, his son, later the Atreides II, becomes the God Emperor, and he's the one who essentially becomes like a human sandworm hybrid. Yeah, it's crazy. It's insane.
Paul's son becomes part worm.
Yeah, and then he when he dies, he stops the terraforming of the planet. But I don't think there's a lot of sandworms left. But from what I read, it was like when he dies, there were sand trout in his body, and they're re-released onto the planet, and it sort of goes back to being desert. But
so let me ask you this, because the worms are so incredibly humongous, are the babies somewhat containable?
I don't know.
Because
how big the babies
if any of these worms get on any planet, the planet's a second Dune.
Well, I think I don't know. I think the circumstances for Dune being what it is were just right. It was already essentially desert. Even when it was cold, it was desert.
So the worms do need close to a desert environment to survive.
And I think and also the planet before it was, when it was teeming with life, had an abundance of crazy life, and that could be part of how the spice came about.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I from what I was told, Frank Herbert, he wrote the first book, and then I think he was sort of pressured by his people to write more books, and so they just got crazier.
He's like, how do I keep adding this?
He's like, He's like, I'm gonna make this up. They want a new book.
Okay, here it is. He's like, I just wanted to tell Paul Atreides' story.
Yeah.
Well, I'm thankful he did, and I'm thankful that they're making these movies, honestly, because I think I don't think I could probably get into the story if I was watching the old stuff, but with the new things, it's beautiful.
Yeah, it really is. Denis Villeneuve really knew how to take the atmosphere from the book.
He did.
And he even takes elements from the old movie as well.
I'm sure
some of the good stuff.
Yeah.
So.
And I was seeing the old film, The Meeting with Paul and the Benny Jesuit lady, and doesn't compare to the new one. There's no comparison. The new one is so much more fascinating and engaging. Yeah. And a lot of people are giving Hans Zimmer's hate for his score of this film. Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah. People are like, not his best work. But come on.
It's beautiful.
It's incredible.
The movie's not a, give me a Hans Zimmer movie.
Dark Knight.
Yeah. Okay. So it's not quite as, action-y, but it's a mood music.
Yeah.
It helps drive the story.
Absolutely.
But it's not like a, high intensity music.
But it doesn't have to be.
It doesn't have to be.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
It was beautiful. It was something Hans Zimmer's always wanted to do. Hans Zimmer always wanted to do since he was a little boy. Since I was a little boy. Anyways, well, I guess we should wrap it up. We hope you learned something. We hope you enjoyed geeking out a little bit on the new Dune film and the Dune story and the Dune filmmaking. And we'll be back next week for part 3 of Dune. And then we're taking a break for Christmas.
Yeah.
So we'll say our Merry Christmases next week. But we love you the same way that the Baron loves his spies.